Data really runs and drives an organization. Now we're facing even a bigger challenge than we've ever had before, and that's called the world of AI.
Welcome back to Stand Out Before RSA. This is the second year we're hosting this series, and the goal is very simple: to spotlight cybersecurity companies that are doing something meaningfully different in the industry as we head into RSA next month. In a crowded market where everyone is competing for attention, the series is really about cutting through the noise, having real conversations with leaders who are building, scaling, and rethinking how cybersecurity companies show up, both in market, but also at and around RSA. Today, I'm excited to be joined by Mike Seashols. Mike is a longtime technology and cybersecurity executive and the CEO of Secuvy. He spent decades leading and advising high-growth tech companies and brings a practical, no-nonsense perspective on data, security, AI, and what it really takes to stand out in today's cybersecurity landscape. So, Mike, great to have you here. Thanks so much for joining us.
It's a pleasure to be here, Gary. Thanks a lot for the invite.
Oh, it's our pleasure to have you. So I guess we'll jump right in, Mike. Kind of talk about a little bit about Secuvy and your customers. What are some of the challenges that you see your customers facing and that your product and company solve for?
Okay, yeah. If you don't mind, before I answer that question, I'd like to share just some of the highlights of my career path.
Sure.
For the first 10 years of my career, I grew up in Indiana, but joined IBM and then got moved out to Palo Alto, California, which in those days was the kind of the center of Silicon Valley innovation. And that role gave me exposure to many of the exciting technology startups, primarily Apple and Oracle. I was introduced to Larry Ellison, the co-founder of Oracle, by Don Valentine, and Don was the founder of Sequoia Capital. A week later, we bonded, and I joined Oracle as their first VP of Sales and Marketing. Oracle led the shift of moving data from file systems into databases located across multiple computing platforms. The adoption of database technology created the opportunity to query data on an ad hoc basis to better operate organizations. Database expansion also created the challenge of data protection and privacy concerns. And I'll have to tell you, in the 1980s, we didn't think a whole lot about it. I followed my Oracle career by joining another leading database vendor in the same role as Ingress. Both of them were successful IPOs. But as I saw the expanding growth of unstructured data, which really couldn't be managed by those structured databases, I co-founded one of the first unstructured database vendors, Versant, and which was then called object-oriented technology. And we were managing the complexity of unstructured data because we saw the growth of unstructured data as organizations expanded their data storage. The experience opened my eyes to the complexity and the growing challenge of managing unstructured data. I then accepted a job as the CEO of Golden Gate Software, which at that point was the leading data replication vendor, which synchronized all the data across all of the worldwide data computing environments. And they would be used for bank balances and ATMs, airline seats, hotel rooms. And we eventually sold Golden Gate to Oracle. But what these roles really showed me was the importance and the value of data. And compared to, it's like a heart-lung machine. Data really runs and drives an organization. Now we're facing even a bigger challenge than we've ever had before with data protection, and that's called the world of AI. And the constant challenge these organizations face of understanding what data they have, where that data is, and who has access to it, those have to be the three questions that every organization has to be able to answer to be able to do their security, privacy, compliance, and governance and AI initiatives. Secuvy answers these questions by delivering visibility of all their data, classification of that data, and then that contextual linkage of that data so you can really understand all the organization's data and the landscape. We kind of call this data intelligence. Gartner Group kind of calls it DSPM, or data privacy posture management. Now, we really get excited when we show the Secuvy results to the customer for the first time. It's amazing. They see a multicolored visual map of all the data in their organization. Their responses are priceless. They say, I didn't know that. I didn't realize that. Are you sure? How did that happen? On and on. And they're sitting there just going through this visual site. Unbelievable, because they find data they never realized existed. And now they're all of a sudden coming to the point of saying, holy cow, my lack of confidence in my ability to do security, privacy, compliance, and governance is shot. It's an exciting time when that occurs because now they're ready to do DSPM or data intelligence.
Yeah, well, Mike, first, thank you for that background because it certainly, I think, gives some context to the conversation. But I'm curious when you're talking to these customers, and it sounds like you kind of just highlighted their aha moment, right? But prior to that, when you first talking to your customers and folks in the industry, what are the problems that they think they have, right? What problems do they come in thinking prior to that aha moment?
Right. Well, I mean, the one thing that's given is the world's changing. And AI is probably one of the most significant change that I've seen in my career. But treating cybersecurity as an IT issue, technology issue, with the approach of using bolt-on technologies to create partial silo solutions, doing periphery protection, doing ransomware protection, doing security compliance, and they're not looking at it as a holistic problem. They're looking at it as a piecemeal problem. And cybersecurity needs to be integrated from the inside out. From my point of view, it's the data out that provides the backbone and the skeleton of their strategy. And I really appreciate Gardner Group coining the word data security posture management. I think their vision is absolutely correct. It's really the ability to have this technology to understand all the data that an organization is responsible for. Now, cybersecurity has traditionally been also an investment that has been difficult to get much money because they're growing it. They're growing it, but it's a defensive strategy against the risk mitigation. And so getting CISOs to get the amount of money that they need to protect their data from cybersecurity, governance, all that cool stuff is really, really hard because most IT organizations, finance organizations, corporate organizations, the governance, they think of it as an expense. Now, AI is changing that to a significant amount because AI is now getting huge investments and they're bets because they're using data as an offensive play. And they're using that to really open up new opportunities for significant productivity and value gains in their organization. Now, the challenge is if you don't have AI governance, you're going to open the exposure to everybody on what that AI engine is running on. Now, to utilize AI, it needs to be synchronized with this organization's data security posture. It has to be. Now, next week, in fact, we'll be announcing a partnership with Nativia and Hammerspace to offer what everybody is coining an AI data platform. That's a cleansed data platform, which will be able to minimize what needs to be on there, but optimize what needs to be on there. It's an exciting opportunity for all of us to be able to have partners of this size to be able to say, okay, here's the engine that you have to be able to have your AI applications, run against. Now, in addition to that, cybersecurity has hundreds of use cases. I mean, they're because they're always defending something that they're all of a sudden realizing is an exposure to them. Industries, healthcare, regulated industries like manufacturing, DOD, all are coming out with compliance requirements that are all new. So you've got to be able to react to that to be able to compete in those organizations. Governments from around the world are doing unique cybersecurity laws. And the cool thing about these laws now is they're being enforced. And you're seeing that through penalties, you're seeing that through closures. So these organizations have finally stepped up to say, here's the way we need to protect the privacy, but also security. And AI is just opening up the kimono. So I'm excited about what's going on the regulation side as well.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I think, we'd all agree that as we walk around RSA and these types of events and all we see AI popping up everywhere. And it obviously sounds like it's woven into kind of what you guys do at Secuvy. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on what you see responsible AI looking like specifically in the cyberspace? Because it's obviously being adopted and talked about a lot, but what does it really look like to be responsible now when we're not necessarily at the end of the journey? We're probably much, much closer to the beginning, right?
And I'll paraphrase it by saying, you have to fight fire with fire. Okay? AI has become the fire in the industry. And if we as technology providers can't defend against that fire with our own AI-driven technology, the other guy's going to be faster and more nimble than we are. So we've got to use AI in our technology. Most technology providers today started their design 10, 20, 30 years ago, and the world is totally different. So they've got to re-architect everything, which is a very difficult decision to make, to kind of shelve what you've got and start from scratch. But let me address what we do first, and then I'll address, what the market requires. The cool thing about Secuvy is the timing. And timing, just like Oracle in 1981, our timing was perfect because many computers, PCs were coming out, the whole, database structures were changing. It's the same thing with AI. AI, our co-founder, Prasant Sharma, headed up one of the earliest AI initiatives that Mark Benioff had at Salesforce. It was called Einstein. Well, Prasant was the guy that headed up the engineering effort. And being able to leverage that experience for building an enterprise class AI engine from Salesforce with pretty much unlimited resources gave him the insights that we then said, holy cow, AI is a tool that can be harnessed to really change how you build application protection around data. So we use AI every place in the product. Primarily, we use it in three areas. We use it to do unsupervised data discovery and visibility. The more you use it, it's like AI. The more you use it, the smarter it gets.
Yep.
And it's the same for us. The more we use Secuvy to do visibility and discovery of data, we really do a better job. And ultimately, you have to scale because this is petabytes of data, and you've got to be able to be accurate while you're doing that visibility. So scale and accuracy, we get that with our AI engine that's driving that visibility. The next is you have to classify what you're visualizing in that data. You classify it. And the complexity, the sensitivity, and the proprietary nature of this unstructured data is really what needs to be protected. And being able to do that with an AI approach and solving that really is the key. Now, most technologies utilize manpower to do that classification. That's all gone. 90%, 95% of that is gone when you use AI. So the benefit is AI eliminates so much of the manual efforts, plus it gives you more accuracy. Now, here's the coup de grace. The cool thing at the end is you do contextual linkage. Because now you have an awareness of what that data is, how it's classified, how does it relate to each other? And the beauty of that is you find linkages that you didn't know you had, which then gives you access to data that you didn't know you had. So that contextual linkage allows you to have a better understanding of what's going on in your data roadmap. Now, regardless of the operating costs, AI can really be deployed by Secuvy in days or weeks. Most technologies in cybersecurity are months and years. Why is that? It's AI. It's friggin' AI. It's amazing. Now, the other thing that we made a commitment to is not to go into a customer site and say, you need to obsolete everything. No. They've made investments. They've got systems that work. When we go in, we try to accentuate how we can make those technologies better, especially in a DLP, Netscope, Purview, things like that. We augment them by helping them with their policy, labeling, those kinds of things. So you can integrate bi-directional connection with those kinds of technologies. And then, your use cases are amazing. You have this DSPM from Gartner. You got DSARs for privacy, which are becoming a drive, especially here in California. You got in the DoD, you have what's called a CMMC and an ITAR. That in the DoD, and it's November of this year. If you're not complied, you're gone. You're gone, and we can't risk that in our supply chain for our government. You got HIPAA in healthcare, et cetera, et cetera. So I think everybody needs to understand you've got to use AI. Cybersecurity is now defense and offense. And the reason is AI has created an offensive strategy. By the time the analyst in a typical environment finds out about something, it's too late. You have to know as it's happening. So you need to have an AI front end to everything that's embracing the power and the productivity of AI to be able to observe and to leverage every aspect of what's going on in that data environment or in the whole system. So as these new data layers come up, which AI is now a data layer, applications are data layers. Tools like Copilot, LLMs, that's just a different use of how user data is being interacted with. Often the traditional technologies can't approach the flexibility and the power of these systems. So we've got to get an AI security system that's a data-first model rather than this policy model, which we've had historically. So I hope that talks a little bit about what we're thinking.
Yeah, it's really helpful. And I love the offensive and defensive approach, right? Because I think a lot of times, as you're well aware, and you hear about it all the time, it's almost too late sometimes, right? Once you realize you're under attack, it's too late. And I know you're a basketball guy. I'm a basketball guy. You got to be a two-way player, right? You got to have some offense. Got to be able to defend a little bit. So let's have a posture that kind of approaches it both ways. I think it's really important. And so you kind of touched on sort of what is making Secuvy different, right? Which is great. I would love to hear, as being a non-technical person myself, right? When you're talking to a customer, obviously I would imagine that those that are in the tech and kind of the CISOs and the CTOs and those types of folks certainly understand the what and the how. But if you're talking to me or someone who's not a tech or maybe a C-level buyer, right? How do you explain your value? What really makes it resonate with that person versus the person that understands the tech?
Right. And that is the ultimate question. To me, that's the backbone of the go-to-market strategy. Because as a startup here in Silicon Valley, I mean, we've not raised a lot of money because we've built through clever technologies. We're really into it for the long run. We're 5 years old. We're figuring out, okay, our technology is mature now. We just did some audits with some independent guys. The scalability is phenomenal. But to talk to the boardroom, to talk to the CXO, to talk to the CISO, I call them up and I'm going to be one of N number of people that are trying to get their attention.
Sure.
And so if it's a referral from one of their advisors or colleagues, I might get an audience. But what we did early on is we said, look, we're going to partner because partnership, the complexity of the problem is so large, one person or one organization is not going to be able to solve the security and privacy, compliance, governance, and AI initiatives in an organization. So when we're going to market, we say, okay, let's first go after, we actually started with audit. Let's go in because we can really help people do risk mitigation. So we partnered with Shellman. Shellman had thousands of customers that they already had a relationship with. So I'm able to tag along with the Shellman go-to-market and their technology providers and their service providers to be able to expand the story. We have now a better solution for your audit. When you're looking at, organizations that are trying to put a sort of a big macro view of how they're doing cybersecurity, I go in with E+. I go in with Optiv. I go in with SMI. I go in with, companies that are cyber sheltered. We had exciting meetings in cyber shelter in Qatar and Dubai last week. Being able to get an entrance through them and with them, then we tell a story that's a together story, which is really what is driving our Nativia and Hammerspace story. We're able to go in as a consortium of solution providers, totally integrated, have bidirectional, already done, so we can go in and we can turn the machine on, it self-installs, and your operation is going. So the go-to-market to get it out an ear and an eye to say, who's Secuvy, we go in with partners. And the partners love us because we solve a really big problem. Where's the data? What is it? Who owns it? How do I secure it? How do I comply? and we kind of get the last mile of their data storage, story. So
Yeah, no, and that's great. I love the sort of the package deal, right? That's certainly helpful. But I'm curious, Mike, did you guys have to pivot in your go-to-market? Was that the plan from day one to say this is a great partnership angle, or we had some stumbles and some falls early on in direct to market, so we're going to make this pivot to the partnership model? As every founder, entrepreneur knows, there's pitfalls along the way, right? So,
yeah.
Is that something you guys kind of went through too as well to figure out, hey, we've done A through X, we got to get all the way to Z, right?
Yeah, great question. Because I got venture partners, and I've got some investments through venture partners, and I love venture partners come to me and said, give me your 5-year plan. I said, what?
Right.
I said, what? A 5-year plan. I'll give you an 18-month plan, but I won't give you a 5-year plan. And having built, this is my 21st startup, and I include Oracle as a startup because
Sure.
we weren't making money when I joined them, and we were 500 million when I left. But the one thing that I can guarantee is change. Okay, guarantee it. Markets change, competitors change, problems evolve, assumptions, availability of resources, all of that. So in building a company, you're always in the change mode. I think there was a little bit of arrogance when we first started the company, and we said, let's go fix really one big problem, and let's go fix privacy. So we put a lot of effort into privacy, and we had a really cool technology. It was self-installing, it protected everybody, it was easy to do, it was integrated with cookies and consent management and all those other cool things. But every time I would knock on a door, they would sit and say, well, what else do you do?
Right.
I'm not looking for a single solution. I'm looking for more of a total solution. So you're sitting there going, well, what else? Okay, let's go do security. And then let's go do compliance. And then let's go do this. So your assumption in going into your go-to-market, I think the given is you have to adapt to the changes that are becoming obvious and maybe anticipating them. One of the smartest things when I did my very first startup, Bessemer Ventures was my investor. And they said, this was my object-oriented database company. And they said, okay, Mike, here's $7 million to start the company. I just want one promise from you. And I said, what's that? And they said, never come back and ask me for more money. And I said, really? And he says, I'm going to have you meet with them. You got your money. I want you to come back with every possible scenario that you can envision on which you might interact with and you might discover as a problem, like size of the market, competitor who gives it away, whatever.
Yep.
And what is your shift that you're never going to need money again? It was probably one of the greatest exercises I ever did because you really learned the anticipation planning that you need to have as an entrepreneur. What if? And doing that before is a heck of a lot more fun and easier than in the middle of it, you're going, oh my gosh, and you're playing pure defense, then you're in the corner and you don't have a strategy of getting out of the corner.
Right.
So my point would be go to market, be flexible, have a lot of, have some crossroads in it, have some validations in it, maybe even do a little bit of, verification of it, but always have your core fundamentals. And the core fundamentals are fairly simple. What's the problem? What's my solution to solve that problem? Is it budgeted? Why am I unique? Why am I better? How do I communicate to that audience?
Yep.
I'm a big believer in Jeffrey Moore's Crossing the Chasm. Are you familiar with that book?
I am, yeah. Great book.
So friggin' right on. Because a lot of entrepreneurs will sit in there and go, oh, I found a customer. I found a nest of customers. And all of a sudden they think they have a market. Well, they're all the early adopters and your market's on the other side of the Rubicon.
Yeah.
You're sitting there investing and all of a sudden you lose control of your company because you've made promises based on that assumption and then the Rubicon hits you. So, use tools like that as you're building out your business.
Yeah, no, that's sage advice. I think, we're on the marketing side of it, obviously. So we're kind of always approaching the go-to-market, and there's always, the need to test and to your point, validate and not be, pigeonholed into one approach. There's a multitude of approaches out there. So finding, kind of charting the best course is important. And Mike, I got, you said 21 startups you've started. Like, that blows my mind. So, kudos to you on all of that. So I think with my last question here, as we start to wrap up, I would love to hear, we're going to coming up to RSA. There's a lot of early stage companies, the early stage expo, a lot of kind of companies that are maybe more established, but still well entrenched in that startup mode and mentality, right?
Right.
What advice would you give, as a 21-time entrepreneur? What advice would you give to other cyber founders or CEOs that are trying to grow the business, establish even on their personal brand side of it?
Yeah.
What advice would you give them as they go through that process?
Yeah. Great question again. Having been a founder, but also been a hired CEO, or being a board member, or being an investor, I think there's several things that I think are just fundamental to success. First, I think, is understanding the problem you're trying to solve. Typically, that's founder driven. The founder's got the insight, he got the drive, he got the wisdom, and whatever you do, keep that founder, whoever that leadership group is, that is always synchronizing and validating what business you're in and what problem you're solving. Keep them close to the market. A lot of times these guys, will head off and become technology advocates, and they're just into, if we build it, they will come. That doesn't smoke real well. So keep your founders, keep your designers, keep your leaders close to the transactions. They don't necessarily have to be transaction involved, but they need to be observing it. They need to listen to the Zoom calls or the webinars. How are people responding to them? It's just validation of what their assumptions are before they get too far into the technology. So keep founders totally engaged, keep leaders engaged. And then as you're transitioning between leadership by the founders to employees, and then you got that delicate, role of who's a doer and who's a leader.
Sure.
I'm a big believer in doers. I'm a doer guy. And I think even CEOs and founders should retain doer status. Now, leadership is absolutely essential, but doers can pretty much show leadership by how they act, how they think, how they communicate, how they share, how they have compassion, but they have bluntness, how they, have, the measurable goals. If I don't measure it, nothing's going to happen, guys. We got to measure everything. So having that empathy of saying, okay, watch me and just kind of emulate me as much as you can. Then the other one that I think is a wise thing I've learned is pick your financing partners very delicately. It's not the guy that gives you the best deal. It's not the pre-money valuation or the investment of the money. That might not be the kind of the roadmap that you want to go down, because they're in it to make money. Okay, you're in it to maybe for your own vision is to change the world or to do something significant in your own career path. So a lot of times I'll use angels, because angels are typically a little bit more entrepreneurial. They understand your pain a little bit more. They don't have quite as much. They don't have all the models that the venture guys have. So I think the angels have become a very key component of how startups and even growth companies can get funded by. And we've got 2 venture funds in our company, and we have 11 angels. And let me tell you, I spend time with my 11 angels because they know my pain. They've been in my seat. They understand. They give me wisdom. They give me connections. Venture guys are really good. They ask me, how's your cash? When are you going to run out of cash? When do we have to put more money in? All those kinds of questions. And I go, whoa, that's important. But, there's other things I'm thinking about too. So, you got to be thinking about all those. So as a founder and as a leader, be delicate on those stories, hire doers. If somebody says, that's not in my job description, we all sweep floors here. We all wash windows here. And I even do the inside of the car. Listen, that's the way you think. You have to think it. The other thing I think is whenever I'm recruiting somebody, do you really understand what you're signing up for? I mean, because this is a lifestyle decision. It's a lifestyle decision. This is something you don't go home and you can take breaks, but this is a 24/7. And so you got to have support within your family, within your, lifestyle of groups. You might have to, I remember my very first startup, I said, guys, we're not washing cars for a year. I don't want you spending time in a car wash. I don't want you washing your car on the weekend. I want you to commit to me, no car washing. It was a symbol. It was really a symbol saying, this has got to be a commitment. And we were very successful. We sold the company, but everybody understood that you're changing your lifestyle here. But the rewards, I'm an addict at this point. I'm an addict to be a startup guy because there's nothing more, and I worked for IBM for 10 years, but there's nothing more stimulating than launching, building, and growing a successful company. There's nothing like it. There's nothing like it.
Well, I love the analogy of, I know it was a directive, but, the analogy of not washing the car that, sometimes you have to get a little muddy, right, to come out on the other end, right? So I think that's an awesome way for us to wrap up here. Mike, this has been incredible. Appreciate your perspective, your clarity around cybersecurity, around our AI, obviously around data. Great hearing about where kind of Secuvy is now. And we'll have to follow you guys and make sure we're staying in touch to follow its success.
We'll work the RSA columns together in a couple.
Perfect. It works for me. So,
all right.
And Mike, this is what Stand Out Before RSA is really intended for. It's, obviously it's a hectic time out there in San Francisco next month, but, spotlighting leaders like yourself and companies that are kind of in market and approaching it thoughtfully, helping to cut through the noise before everything even starts. Yeah. That's really what this is all about. So if you found this conversation valuable, please connect with Mike. I'm sure you're on LinkedIn, follow Secuvy, stay tuned for more from us on this series as we continue to count down to RSA. Thanks so much for listening.
Yeah, thanks, Gary. Exciting times.
Thanks, Mike.
Hey, bye.